Everything seemed like just another event with a sports star. Until a little girl made the entire park emotional. It was an afternoon with clear skies in Oakland, California. The sun cast a golden light over the community park, where the green grass contrasted with the vibrant colors of Warriors balloons and flags scattered throughout the space. Families gathered with folding chairs and blankets spread on the ground, while children ran excitedly with sports shirts, popcorn in hand and cell phones pointed at the small stage set up next to the basketball court. The aroma of cotton candy and hot dogs permeated the air, mixing with laughter and animated conversations that created a festive atmosphere. In the middle of the crowd, Emma squeezed her mother's hand tightly. She was 8 years old, wearing a simple pink dress with small flowers embroidered on the hem, and her blonde hair tied in a ponytail, decorated with a ribbon that matched her dress. Her intense and silent blue eyes didn't stray from the stage, where in moments one of the greatest American basketball idols would be. Around her, happy voices and vibrant music echoed, but Emma seemed not to hear. Her world at that moment was different, a world of hope and fear intertwined. Emma's mother, Sarah, wearing a denim shirt and beige pants, tried to disguise the tension on her face. The deep circles under her eyes revealed sleepless nights, and her hands, although trying to appear firm, trembled slightly, when not occupied. She touched her daughter's shoulder affectionately, leaning to speak near her ear to be heard amid the buzz. "Everything will be all right, my love." Emma responded only with a slight nod, without taking her eyes off the wooden structure with microphones and speakers. Her small fingers played nervously with the hem of her dress, rolling and unrolling the fabric. Few knew what really brought that girl there. For most, it was just a community event with a sports star, another afternoon of autographs and selfies. But for Emma, it was a chance, one she couldn't waste, even though her childish heart trembled with nervousness. About 20 minutes earlier, while waiting in line to enter the park, Emma had taken from her pocket a paper folded with excessive care. On it, childish sketches, scribbled with colored pencils, tried to organize the words she had rehearsed so much in the last few days in front of the bathroom mirror, whispering to herself when no one could hear. The letters were crooked, but sincere. Each line carried the weight of a pain that she still didn't know how to fully name, but felt in her heart since she heard the word tumor being whispered by doctors in the cold, aseptic hospital corridors. Michael, her 11-year-old brother, had been hospitalized for weeks. Chemotherapy had left him weak, so weak that he could barely sit up in bed without help. His hair was gone, as was the sparkle in his eyes. The video games he loved so much remained untouched, beside the bed. He could barely play as before, and the laughter that always echoed through the house had turned into low moans when the pain tightened. And Emma, even without understanding everything, knew that her parents were trying beyond the possible to keep everything working. Money, hope, patience, everything seemed to be hanging by a thread. The medical bills piled up on the kitchen table. The parents' nighttime whispers, full of concern, leaked under the bedroom door and reached Emma's attentive ears. She heard words like specialist, experimental treatment, insurance doesn't cover, and we can't afford it. And that's when the idea was born, simple as it could only be in a child's mind. The buzz suddenly increased. Shouts and applause began to spread like waves through the park. Children climbed on their parents' shoulders to see better. Camera flashes blinked like fireflies in daylight. Steph Curry had arrived, surrounded by a small team and some discreet security guards. He walked among the crowd, smiling and greeting fans with the same naturalness as someone walking through their own garden. He wore a white Warriors t-shirt and dark jeans. His presence was magnetic. Charisma, humility, and that typical tranquility of someone who is used to dealing with crowds, but who, at the same time, never let fame go to his head. Emma took a deep breath, and for the first time since they arrived, her gaze moved. It fixed on Steph, who was now climbing the steps of the stage with light steps, waving to all sides. His face shone with a genuine smile, illuminated by the golden light of the Californian afternoon. The mother bent down beside her and whispered in her daughter's ear, "When he comes down, you'll know the right time." Emma just nodded. Her heart was beating so loudly that it drowned out the sound of the park. She felt her palms sweating, and a strange tingling ran through her body, from the tips of her toes to the top of her head. It wasn't just nervousness. It was the feeling of being about to do something important, something that could change everything. Steph Curry spoke into the microphone naturally, as if he were in an intimate conversation with friends, thanking them for the warm reception. His smile was open, his eyes showed lightness, and each phrase drew sincere applause from the audience. He spoke about inspiration, community, and the importance of sport as a tool for transformation. He mentioned social projects, told stories of overcoming, and made the crowd laugh with some unpretentious jokes about training and teammates. Emma listened, but each word sounded distant, as if the sound passed through a filter, an invisible barrier between her and the rest of the world. Time seemed to slow down around her. People moved in slow motion, and sounds arrived with a second of delay. It was the feeling of being simultaneously inside and outside the moment. The crowd was delighted with Steph, but Emma felt something else, the weight of a mission that was becoming increasingly real as the moment approached. Her eyes fixed on the player's hands, which gestured as he spoke, and she thought of Michael, lying down, pale, dreaming only of seeing a live game again. Her brother spoke of Steph with a sparkle in his eyes, even on the most difficult days, even when the fever left him confused and words came out slurred. "He never gives up, Emma," Michael would say, holding the miniature basketball that never left his hospital bed. "Curry always believes he's going to make the next basket, no matter how many he misses." The speech ended amid deafening applause. Steph descended from the stage slowly, surrounded by agents and assistants who tried to organize the meeting with fans. He began to approach the front row, where children and parents waited for a chance for an autograph or a selfie. His expression remained genuine. Unrehearsed smiles, attentive looks for each person who greeted him. It was different. From what Emma expected from a celebrity, there was no rush or distance. It was the moment. Emma's mother squeezed her hand and whispered gently, "Go, dear. You can do it." Emma looked at her mother, then at the stage. She swallowed hard. Her body seemed to want to retreat, but she took a step forward, and then another. The pink dress swayed slightly with each movement, and the ribbon in her hair, now a little crooked after hours in the park, trembled along with her hesitant steps. She was too small to be noticed among the adults, but her determination pushed her forward, as if an invisible force guided her. Some people, realizing what was happening, made space. A man with a professional camera bent down slightly, as if sensing that he was witnessing something special. When Steph came close, his eyes scanned the faces. He distributed smiles, autographs, greetings. Then his gaze found Emma standing there, with the hem of her dress between her fingers, and a look that didn't ask for a photo. It asked for attention. There was something different about that girl, something that made Steph pause. Perhaps it was the seriousness on such a young face, or the absence of an autograph book or cell phone in her hands. Steph squatted, leveling himself to her height, with a welcoming smile that made dimples appear on his face. "Hello, young lady. What's your name?" "Emma." The voice came out trembling, but firm. It wasn't a whisper or a shout. It was the tone of someone who had something important to say. The crowd, gradually, fell silent. The energy changed. The smiles around turned into expressions of expectation. People began to realize that something different was happening, something that escaped the predictable script of celebrity encounters. Steph tilted his head, curious. His kind and attentive eyes focused entirely on the girl in front of him, as if at that moment nothing else existed in the park. "Emma, what a beautiful name. What do you want to tell me?" Emma took a deep breath, looking for a brief second at her mother, then back at the player. Her hands were shaking. Her face, flushed with nervousness, showed freckles that only appeared when she was under tension. But she spoke, and her voice sounded clearer than she expected. "My brother Michael, he is very sick. He has a brain tumor. He needs a special doctor. But we don't have money. Can you help him?" The silence that fell over the park was absolute. Conversations ceased. Cell phones stopped trembling in search of focus. Children, previously agitated, now observed the scene with silent curiosity. The world, for a moment, stopped around that girl and that man. Steph kept his eyes on her. The smile slowly disappeared, replaced by an expression of genuine surprise and compassion. It wasn't the rehearsed reaction of a celebrity, but the human response of someone confronted with the raw truth in a child's voice. He looked at Emma's mother, who now had watery eyes, hands pressed, one against the other, and then back to the girl. His gesture was subtle, but full of presence. One of his hands rested gently on her shoulder. "That's a very brave question, Emma." His voice, previously full of energy, was now low, dense. "You love your brother very much, don't you?" Emma nodded, with eyes shining with contained tears. "He is my best friend," she whispered. "He used to take me bike riding. Now he can't even get out of bed." Steph took a deep breath. The moment was more than public. It was deeply human, and everyone there knew it. The vulnerability exposed in Emma's voice had dissolved all the barriers normally present at these events. There were no more fans and celebrity, only people connected by something real and painful. For a few seconds, Steph didn't say anything else. He just looked at Emma with the expression of someone absorbing the weight of the words he had just heard. Around them, adults lowered their cell phones, children stopped talking. The entire park seemed suspended between air and emotion, as if an invisible bubble had formed around that small space where Emma and Steph were. One of the assistants stepped forward, perhaps to indicate that it was time to move on, but Steph discreetly raised his hand, signaling for them to wait. This moment wasn't just another on the agenda. It was one of those rare instances when something bigger was at stake. Steph finally broke the silence, his voice more contained but firm. "I'll tell you something, Emma," he began, with his eyes fixed on her. "I'm going to use my voice, my visibility, what I have, to draw attention to your cause, to help Michael. Because no one, especially a child like you, should carry this weight alone." Emma's mother brought her hands to her mouth. Her eyes, which were previously just watery, now shed discreet tears, which ran down without her being able to contain them. It was as if an internal dam had broken. weeks of worry and tension finding a small escape valve. Emma, in turn, didn't respond, but her shoulders relaxed, as if she had delivered the burden she had been holding for days. The folded paper in her pocket, with the carefully rehearsed words, didn't even need to be removed. She had said exactly what she needed, with the sincerity that only a child can have. Still, she didn't expect what would come next. Steph turned slightly, raising his voice enough for everyone around to hear. "That's why we're here today. This is more than basketball. It's about taking care of each other. It's about community." Emma reminded me of that. Some applauded in a contained manner. Others just observed in silence, moved. A woman wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. A man hugged his son tighter against his chest. What was before a happy and common event had turned into something rare, an instant of shared humanity. Then, without warning, Emma took 2 steps forward and threw her arms around Steph's neck. He received her naturally, still, kneeling, and returned the hug with a gentle hand on her back. It was a pure, disarmed gesture, without words, but full of meaning. The embrace of someone who needs support, meeting the embrace of someone who is willing to offer it. A collective "ow" echoed through the park. Someone wiped their eyes with their shirt sleeve. A man nearby took off his cap and stood still, head down. A professional photographer captured the moment, instinctively knowing that she was recording something precious. Steph smiled in the hug, then spoke near the girl's ear. "You are a special child, Emma. Never doubt that. What you did today for your brother is braver than any shot I've ever made in a final." As she pulled away, Emma's eyes were still wet, but now there was something new in them. Relief. Hope. As if the sky, which before seemed to be falling, had gained an invisible support. Steph stood up, adjusting the t-shirt that had become a little wrinkled during the hug. He looked around. His eyes caught the attentive faces, the emotional expressions, the discreet smiles that now emerged, like the sun after an unexpected rain. How many more Emmas are out there, hidden in the crowd, afraid to say what they feel? How many Michaels are waiting for a chance? That's why we should always be willing to listen, to pay attention beyond the obvious. Emma's mother now looked at him with explicit gratitude on her face, tears now flowing freely. She didn't say anything. She just nodded slightly, like someone thanking with their whole heart. "We're going to make things better," he said finally, smiling again, with a confidence that seemed capable of moving mountains. "You can believe in me." The crowd exploded in applause. But there, at the center of it all, a little girl in a pink dress and blue eyes had just changed the course of her own story. The minutes that followed were a whirlwind. Advisors approached, exchanged information with Emma's mother. Cards were passed, numbers noted on pieces of paper. A doctor who was in the audience approached, introduced himself. Journalists covering the event began to ask questions. Michael's story was beginning to gain wings, to leave the invisibility of the hospital room for public knowledge. The van with tinted windows moved away slowly, while the sound of applause still echoed among the trees in the park. Some people were already beginning to collect chairs and blankets, but the mood wasn't the same as at the beginning of that afternoon. There was a different silence in the air, the kind of silence that remains when something important has happened, when people are reminded of values that, in the hustle and bustle of daily life, sometimes remain dormant. Emma walked hand in hand with her mother, towards the exit. She still held the small warrior's flag she had received at the entrance of the event. But now, she pressed it against her chest, as if it were something valuable, a talisman, a symbol. that miracles sometimes happen on ordinary days. The mother looked at her sideways, discreetly wiping her face with the sleeve of her blouse. The circles under her eyes were still there, but there was a new shine in her eyes, that small spark of hope that can illuminate even the darkest nights. "You were amazing, you know," she said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Emma didn't say anything, just smiled. A smile that carried the wisdom of someone who, even at 8 years old, had learned that love can move mountains, or, at least, open doors that seemed locked forever. On the sidewalk, near the parking lot, a couple approached. The woman, in a white coat with a badge hanging around her neck, bent down and handed a card to Emma's mother. "I'm a pediatric nurse at UCSF," she said, with a gentle smile. "I know an oncologist who might be able to help. If you want, I can make that connection." The mother took a while to respond, choked by surprise. It was as if the universe, suddenly, had decided to conspire in their favor after so long rowing against the tide. "Thank you," she murmured. "Thank you, really." That night, at home, Emma sat next to her father in the living room. He watched the local news with a tired but attentive expression. The cup of cold coffee on the side table and the rolled-up sleeves of his business shirt betrayed a workday that had extended too long. And then, there it was, the image of Emma and Steph Curry hugging, stamped on the screen. A journalist narrated the encounter as a rare moment of truth and emotion at a public event. The father widened his eyes, turning to his daughter with an expression of surprise and pride mixed. The mother appeared in the background, with her cell phone in hand. "There are a lot of messages," she said, unable to contain her amazement. "People asking how to help. An NGO sent an email. There's even a doctor from Houston wanting to talk about Michael's case." The father looked up, surprised. He looked at Emma, who was huddled on the Ives couch with a blanket, and smiled. For the first time in weeks, the tiredness on his face gave way to something lighter. "You did this?" he asked, with a choked voice. Emma just nodded, with a shy smile. "I just told the truth," she answered, shrugging as if what she had done wasn't extraordinary. Later, while brushing her teeth before bed, Emma stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. It was the same face as always. Freckles, blue eyes, blonde hair now loose. But there was something different. A spark in the eyes that wasn't there before. The feeling that sometimes a single question at the right time can change everything. The next morning, she entered the hospital room where Michael slept, surrounded by equipment that beeped softly. The smell was the same as always: alcohol, disinfectant, and silence. But that day, the air seemed different, lighter, as if somehow hope had gained form and was floating in the environment. Michael slowly opened his eyes when he noticed his sister, a weak smile forming on his lips, dried by the medication. "Did you talk to Curry?" he asked with a hoarse voice. Emma walked to him and held his hand gently, careful not to displace the IV needle. "I did," she replied, with the brightest smile she could form. "And he said he's going to help you." Michael smiled, weak but sincere. His eyes shone with a hope that hadn't been seen in days. In an effort greater than normal, he gently squeezed his sister's hand. "You could do it," he said, the words interrupted by difficult breathing. "You always were the bravest of us two." Emma then did what she knew best, stayed by his side in silence. With her hand still in his, she picked up a book on the bedside table and began to read in a low voice, as she did every day. She knew that the most important thing was already happening. The world outside was moving. People were making phone calls. Doctors were discussing treatment options. An entire community was mobilizing, all because she had the courage to ask a simple question. And as she read to her brother, Emma thought about how, sometimes, heroes don't wear capes or make three-point baskets. Sometimes, they just have enough courage to ask for help when needed. The hospital room window let in a ray of sunlight that formed a small rainbow when it passed through the water glass on the table. Outside, life continued its course, but inside that room, something had changed forever. And it all began with a question.